Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Valentine's edition of Tahoe Silicon Mountain's Mountain Minds Monday. Mountain Minds Monday is our flagship program. We've been hosting this speaker series for about 12 years now. We do have Mountain Minds Monday, the second Monday of the month, and we're actually getting very close to returning to in-person. We do have First Friday at 4 on hiatus until that's back in person. That is an Entrepreneurs Roundtable program, and we're looking forward to re-welcoming our annual event, the Pitch Camp and Pitch Showcase, this fall. We do have next month all lined up already. On the March 14th Mountain Minds Monday, we'll be welcoming the Donner Relief Party Expedition, Heroism Embodied. And that's a follow-up to a talk we had in December of 2020. Wow, it's been a little while. So looking forward to welcoming them back. The best way to keep informed of what's going on with Tahoe Silicon Mountain is to sign up for our email newsletter. We only send about 2 emails a month letting you know what's coming up and reminding you to show up. Right now, you can also be a part of the community in our Facebook group. And of course, if you sign up for YouTube, you'll get access to archives of all of our previous events, including introductions that we did when we were in person. And by subscribing to the channel, bit.ly, YouTube, tsm.com, and that is case sensitive. By subscribing to the channel, you'll get an alert when we go live just around 5 o'clock on that second Monday of the month. We do have a suggested donation of $5. The best way to make that donation is to go to TahoeSiliconMountain.com. In the upper right is a yellow donate button. And you can do a one-time contribution or a recurring contribution. And what that does is it supports our 100% volunteer-run organization. We do have to use a few vendors for a few things, like bookkeeping, because we are a 501c3, which makes your donations tax deductible. We have technology subscriptions, and we do have some newsletter and social media support. It is an all-volunteer board. The 5 of us have been volunteering for some time, and we're looking forward to welcoming new board members. So please do reach out if you have interest in joining the board of Tahoe Silicon Mountain. We have several sponsors that are also contributors to making this all happen. And our longtime gold sponsor is Holland & Hart. Holland & Hart is a law firm with offices here in Truckee. They strive to lead their profession by giving the highest level of service and loyalty to their clients and forging a team, lawyers, paralegals, staff, and other professionals whose work is infused with their values. The founder's philosophy was simple: keep going up, and if you get stuck, there's always another route to the top. This is where the spirit of the team of the firm's pioneering and innovation began. Our silver sponsor is Mobo Law. Mobo is a full-service law firm started in Truckee. Mobo Law provides excellent representation in an approachable, responsive environment with a human touch. The firm is comprised of attorneys and support staff with integrity and a solid work ethic, providing exceptional work that truly benefits our clients. We love our work and it shows. They love their work and it shows. In addition, we have several community partners. Nevada County Tech Connection has been a longtime partner, Tahoe Truckee Media, the Truckee Tahoe Airport, the Lyft Workspace, where we broadcast this publication from, and the Truckee Chamber of Commerce. So thank you to our sponsors, and you too can become a sponsor. Again, the bit.ly links are case sensitive, or you can email sponsorship@TahoeSiliconMountain.com. Without further ado, we're moving on to the main event. This is an exciting one. Dave is a board member. He joined a few local historical societies in 2018 to help celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad in 2019. And this was really a footing for helping with the creation of the new Museum of Truckee History, the MoTH. Dave used his technical experience to assist with museum design decisions. He became the primary creator of 2 of the museum's exhibits. He'll speak today about the 1960 Squaw Valley Olympics and why they were important to Truckee and how they influenced the Olympics even to this year. So please join us in welcoming Dave and looking forward to what he has to share with all of us.
Okay, let's see if this works. So we'll talk a little bit about a Silicon Valley engineer retiring, but where, and then how to engage with where the decision was made, which was Truckee, and helping out with the new museum, and then some lessons and stories associated with helping out with the museum. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. I went to UC Berkeley in electrical engineering, computer science. Ran off and worked for HP for a couple of years as a design engineer, and then went back to Berkeley for an MBA. I then joined 3Com when it had 13 employees and stayed with it until it had 2,000. For those of you that don't know 3Com well, I brought one of the boards that I worked on. This is an Ethernet board. As you can see, it's a fairly good size. It would connect into the mini computers on the gold connectors. And then out here on the AUI port, it would go out and talk to the transceiver. That was kind of a fun project to be associated with. Put that down. I next joined Crescendo, which at the time had 24 employees, and stayed with it until it was acquired by Cisco, which turned out to be their first acquisition. And then over the next 20 years, I did help with startups in both consulting and as a contract employee. And I ended up at SunPower. I was there for 8 years and was their first residential sales manager, residential channel sales manager, and it helped set up their retail channel. At the end, by the time I left, we had 425 dealers selling our products. And I retired in 2015, and so it was great to have the Silicon Valley experience because it gave me some skills and startup knowledge. But now, what to do with it? And so, what did I learn in Silicon Valley? I learned that networking is important. We've heard the story, or we've heard the thing about the 6 degrees of freedom to Kevin Bacon, which is, it says that there's a way to connect to people. Well, I found that in Silicon Valley that it's more like 2 degrees of separation, and here in Truckee it's probably closer to 1 degree of separation. It's a smaller town, and a lot of people know each other. Another thing I learned in Silicon Valley was that there's a process for developing something new, and I'll talk a little bit about that as that it applies to a project that I did here in Truckee. I also learned that when you're trying to establish partners and you're trying to work with others, it's good to pretend that you're in their shoes. By doing so, you figure out the hot points and how to make those shoes fit well, or how to make the interface work best. I also learned that startups are personnel limited, and so because they can't have lots of people that are employed by them, they like jack of all trade employees. So for those of you that are going to start your own business, I encourage you to increase your width or your expertise in various areas, so you can be your own jack of all trades. And the last significant lesson that I picked up was that of all the functional areas, and by this I'm referring to manufacturing, finance, et cetera, that sales pays the highest dollars per hour, with the exception of the CEO. So that's a hint if you want to be money driven, if you're coin operated, so to speak. So when I went to retire, my concept was to retire well. I only get to do it once. What am I going to do? And so so part of that had to do with looking for a retirement location. And so what I did was I said to myself, I want to do stuff all year round. So how do you do stuff in the winter? And I said skiing would be my answer to that one. That lots of places have tennis courts and swimming pools and places to go hike and canoe. But the winter was the harder one. So I went to Ski Magazine, pulled down their top 100, and I put it into a spreadsheet, and then set up some criteria as to what looked good. And so now the real question becomes, well, what criteria? And so we took our new RV, and there it is there in the picture on the right, and went driving around. And we went to logical places that were in the US in the western half. So I was willing to move into the Rockies, but I didn't want to go past the Rockies. And so one of the criteria was healthcare. We knew that would be important long term. But one of the things we came to realize was, if you don't know what you're going to need healthcare in, you may not be in the right location. So different hospitals or different healthcare areas have different specialties. We also cared about schools, both for ourselves and for others. We cared about culture. We wanted to go to concerts and do art things and keep scratching that itch. We like the fun amenities, whether it's tennis and lakes and stuff like that, places to run the dog. And then the other thing that we came up with concept was the dollars per square foot for our new abode where we're going to live. But the last one that came into play was having either us visit the kids or the grandkids, or vice versa, having them come to us. So we wanted to make that easy. And so we found that the other towns couldn't substantially beat our home that we already had in Truckee. In 1996, we bought a second home in Tahoe Donner, and we were surprised that the dollars per square foot in Truckee were substantially similar to other ski areas. I expected that some of the places in the hinterland, so to speak, would be dramatically cheaper, and that wasn't the case. So in 2017, we attempted to live in our 1996 house, but we found that it was too small for the combination of both our guests and our three homes, because my parents had passed away, and so we had their stuff. We had the stuff from our house in Los Altos, and then we had the house from we had the furniture, et cetera, from 1996. So we were overflowing, so to speak. And so we drew up plans and talked to people about getting our house expanded. And because the house that we already owned was a single story, for us to expand, making it a two-story, we had to virtually tear it down. And we were constrained by our footprint due to Tahoe Donner setbacks. And so that seemed like a weird thing to do, to tear down a perfectly good house. And so building up also was something that we were trying not to do. That we thought that with our getting older and our arthritis in the knees and hips, it was the wrong direction to build. So we ended up buying a different home in Tahoe Donner and turning the 1996 home into a long-term rental, which, by the way, has worked out really well. Okay, so now that we got a place to live, we've satisfied Maslow's theories here at the beginning, or at the bottom rather. Now let's go up the Maslow's pyramid and contribute to society. And so so again, we set up criteria on how to do this. Um, First off, it had to be something that my wife and I could do together. She's a civil engineer with an MBA, and we wanted to do stuff that we could share. And my wife is also strong in product marketing. She's 12 years at Sun Microsystems, so she had stuff she could contribute. We wanted to contribute to society that would be fun for us. We didn't want this to be a pain. We thought it'd be best if it had a technical component, and we wanted to be able to contribute when it was convenient for us, and so no compensation, volunteer only. And so we visited and met and explored a whole range of organizations. I don't know how many. We said yes to every group for one meeting. We didn't always go back, but we tried to reach out in a lot of ways. And one of the groups that we ran into was the Truckee Donner Historical Society, and they had a plethora of photos that needed to be scanned, and I had scanned photos before for my family, and so I was comfortable helping them with that. And so that's how I got started with the Truckee Donner Historical Society. Well, about that time, somebody says, "Hey, the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad's coming up. Let's go celebrate that." And so that was scheduled for May 10th, 2019. And one idea was to have that celebrated on a particular day, May 10th. And another idea was, gee, let's spread that out over the summer. If, the Transcontinental Railroad really changed Truckee's history. And so let's talk about that. Let's try and put that in perspective. And so we went nuts trying to get things done. So one of the things that we did was we said, hey, wouldn't it be neat to get a postal stamp done? Well, it turns out that there's a procedure for recommending a new stamp for the U.S. and it kind of has these criteria on it. And to some degree, it kind of looks like a Boy Scout merit badge. You have to go get all the check marks done. And yet our particular interests fit the check marks pretty well. So I wrote a letter and submitted. One of the things that they say in the criteria and the setup is you can't take credit. You can't say that you actually did this. So I don't know if it's true that I was helpful in this, but we did get there is a U.S. postal stamp that acknowledges the Transcontinental Railroad. It shows the two trains that came into Promontory Point, Utah, the Jupiter and the 119 from Union Pacific, and so it's kind of fun. And so those stamps are around. And here's a close-up picture of them. The next thing we did was we decided to do some presentations, and so some of the presentations we did ourselves at the airport, and some of them we did at the Memorial State Park. We got the 4th of July parade that runs through Truckee to be themed as the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad. We set up a website. We said, hey, this should be fun for all ages. And so we said, what would kids like? And so one of the ideas was to set up this thing called passports. We kind of patterned it off of the Junior Ranger program that the National Park Service has, in which you get a passport or you get a booklet, and you run around and you get it stamped. And so we created a booklet and put in it 24 places, 12 in downtown Truckee and 12 locations that ran from downtown Truckee up to Donner Summit. And we put in information about those 24 sites. So for example, today at the Squeezed Inn, that sits in the building where the first bank was set up in Truckee. And in 1868, it was also the site of the first bank robbery. And so we tell the story of how the bank robbers weren't successful, that the locals had their guns, and the robbers were shot at, and one died of an infection from a gun wound in his foot. So we tried to bring history alive with this passport program for the kids. At the locations where we had the passports, we also created historical posters. So there's a poster that we created, for example, at the Squeezed Inn. We also had 17 events. Some of these were railroad things out in the regional park. Some of them were hikes through Jaboom Street to point out old buildings, etc. We also did a bunch of articles and covered topics that were about things that happened because of the Transcontinental Railroad. For example, we were able to grow and export ice. Well, if you didn't have the railroad, you wouldn't have been able to move the ice. So we wrote an article about that. So we had 15 articles that showed up in the local papers. And we also had posters that went up around town that we updated each month to talk about the upcoming events. So that's how we did our advertising, so to speak. And we also ran some hikes. And lastly, we set up a Gold Spike drink. So the Gold Spike drink was for those that were in town that were of 21 or older. And so we went around and had 11 bars in Truckee offer this drink. It was a combination of rye, fruit juices, lemon peel, and a shot of Galliano to make the Gold Spike. And so in many ways, this looks like a product launch to me, right? That we tried to hit different people with things that they might appreciate. And so it's almost the 7 times 7 ways. So that was fun. That was great. And yet by the end of the summer of 2019, the Truckee museums had tons of content, but it was overflowing. The railroad caboose just couldn't display all of the railroad content that we have. The old jail museum that was set up in 1875 has too much stuff. It's hard to tell stories and tell the story of the museum. And the Donner Memorial State Park had become more of a visitor center than a museum. And we know that there are lots of successful businesses dependent upon visitors, whether it's ski areas or the bars. And yet we didn't have a museum covering the range of Truckee history. So with that, we said, oh boy, there's an opportunity. And so the Truckee Donner Railroad Association, or Railroad Society, and the Truckee Donner Historical Society jointly were approached by the town of Truckee to use the depot space that was becoming available. And so this became known as the Museum of Truckee History, and for shorthand, we say MoTH. And so what do? Well, we said, let's pick a theme. What's our museum going to be about? And it's about Truckee through time, and over time it adapted. And so we then went out and visited other museums with a critical eye and learned from them. And we said, gee, we've only got 570 square feet. What are we going to do? So we set up 9 exhibits, and we squeezed them in. And part of this was to use artifacts, which we had, and then combine that with dynamic touchscreen displays which would then tell stories or give more information about the artifacts, which allowed us to be flexible and keep the artifacts out of the hands of some youngins. We've got some pretty good collection of lumber saws that are sharp. So let's keep it safe. And we also have some incredible photography, all done locally. They tell some incredible stories, and they're the real deal. And so that's fun to put on the wall as well. And so for the touchscreens, what we did was, or what Ed Larson came up with the concept was to use a stylus, so that it would not only reduces the fingerprints on the screen, but we could clean it well, because we could put the styluses in alcohol baths before we reuse them. So as we thought about the touchscreen displays, there were some technical considerations. So we obviously wanted to tell the story. And so what we did in many cases was we had people that knew the content, and we complemented with people that knew how to do PowerPoint or some other things. So we weren't limiting ourselves by, if you didn't know how to do PowerPoint, you couldn't add content. We set up groups or teams of 2 or 3 people and use that to help with our content. We also set up a style guide because we had, or we're going to have 9 displays. We wanted them to feel similar, like they were all part of the same museum. And so we set up a style guide with colors and fonts and sizes. We also set up a concept of how the PowerPoints would run, in the sense of having a home button. We could go 2 or 3 layers, and then you would always come back to home, and then you could start off on another path. All of the displays are the same size. All the displays are the same look. And behind them are mini PCs. These are flash-based. They offer no fan. They're very low power. And we just used Velcro to attach them to the back of the displays. And then the displays are wall mounted. So that was kind of the things we set up. And so that's the process. And then we said, okay, let's go do this. And so let me share some examples here. And so specifically, one of the developments that I got a chance to play with was talking about Truckee in the modern era from 1960 to today. And so I started guessing as to what the highlights were. And so to some degree, you might call this an alpha product. And then I went to some experts that had actually lived here and some others that were very well read, and said, hey, what do you think? And so fortunately, I had access to these folks, and so then we did some improvements, and then I was able to either read articles and books or interview actual participants. So one of the highlights that I came up with, or that we came up with, was the incorporation of the town, and the first mayor, Kathleen Egan, was or is available. And so it was wonderful to hear stories from her, and insights, stories in the not in the fictional sense. These are actual events that occurred. And so put together draft slides. We had editors review it, improve, and therefore to improve the slides, and then we converted it all to slideshow format, and so I think of this as one of those processes that is applicable to other developments. So as we went through this, we tried to keep a technical eye on some of the topics. So for example, in the 1960 Olympics, it was true that we had the rocking stone covered with the Olympic flame the night before the Olympics ran. But gee whiz, did you know that it was the the first time that computerized results were available for any Olympics. It was also the first televised Olympics. And timers were used to operate to 1,000th of a second. And it was the first time that there was an Olympic Village. And this is the first stadium with movable seats. So Blythe Arena had one wall that you could move the seats out of the way, and you could see the opening and closing ceremony, and then you could move the seats back and see the figure skating or the ice hockey games. And this is also where the first pageantry chairman came in, Walt Disney. Now, Walt added a lot of value. There's some great stories about that. And so, gee, is this technical? Well, I don't know, but it sure was putting a team together. And Walt made it much more interesting than just watching a skier run down the hill. It was he did the opening and closing ceremonies. He did a lot of great things. And he also set up entertainment for the athletes. He had Art Linkletter come in and do entertainment in the evenings at 8 p.m. So that the athletes would stay in the Olympic Village. And so why do I bring this up? Because as we're doing our presentations, we wanted to add context and say, gee, why is this important? So to some degree, this kind of reminds me of the speeds of feeds that you might see on a product data sheet. There was a question about what was the impact of the 1960 Winter Olympics on Truckee. The first thing is that it was clear now that world-class skiing was available in Northern California, thereby creating a tourist draw. If Northern California was good enough to have the Olympics, then it must be world-class skiing. And second thing is that it moved the center of the North Lake Tahoe winter sports away from Donner Summit, which had really been the headquarters of the ski industry from the 30s up until, we'll call it mid 60s, to Squaw, Alpine, and eventually North Star, as the transportation changed from being by train to instead being by train and railroad to being by car. So I-80 was opened over the Donner Summit in 1960. And so the Olympics brought awareness, jobs, and money to the Truckee corridor or the Truckee Gateway. For those that are looking for more details about the 1960 Olympics, there's a book or the final report that was done for this the 1960 Olympics, provided by the California Olympic Committee or Olympic Commission. And so this has all the details, and so you can find out who scored which goals and what the judging was on a particular figure skater, et cetera. And so I think of this kind of as the details you might find for RFC. If you're talking about the internet, a request for comment, tells you how the internet protocol works. Well, this is the report that's got all the details on the 1960 Olympics. So then this leads me to some stories as you dig into this, as you go to put something together on behalf of a particular topic. It became clear that there were some fun stories. So, for example, the Cold War was hot and heavy in 1959 and 1960 as the Olympics were being put in place. The Soviet Union, which prior to 1960 had very few Winter Olympic medals, gained a ton of them with regards to the 1960 Olympics. They put a lot of emphasis on it, and they were trying to show that their system was better at producing athletes than the other systems. This may have been early on with the first example of cheating, but that's unclear at this point. Another thing that happened with because of the Olympics was they closed some of the gentlemen's clubs in the 1950s. If you look at the map on the right, you'll see a yellow square kind of highlighting downtown. There's the there's Donner Pass Road, which at the time was called Front Street, and behind it, behind all the saloons and bars, was Jaboom Street. And so Jaboom Street was where the gentlemen's clubs were, and there was tremendous concern that there would be activities back there that weren't very polite, and so those were closed in the late 50s. There's also another story about driving down Jaboom Street, that the potholes were so bad on Jaboom Street that if you were driving straight down Jaboom Street, the police knew you were drunk because you weren't swerving to miss the potholes. Another story about the potholes, which were both on Jaboom Street and elsewhere, was that there was a pothole fishing contest, which, if you think about it, that's a very fun concept, right? Who's got the biggest trout coming out of the local potholes or chuck holes? Another story about that I heard when looking at the Olympics was the Blythe Arena ice rink, its demise. And what that was about was, it's kind of a little hard to tell, but on the sides here, they have these columns that have wires on them to hold up the roof. And so inside this building there are no columns. It's open and huge. And over the following 20 some odd years after the Olympics, ownership had changed to the U.S. Forest Service, and they noticed some leaks. And so what do you do with a leaky roof? Well, they added tar and gravel to the roof, and to some degree that added a little bit of weight, but more importantly, it added insulation. And so the way the roof was designed was the heat from the refrigeration units, that recall the thermodynamic cycles, was used to melt the snow. Well, with the added insulation, the snow didn't melt and the roof collapsed in 1984. Another story that I learned about while doing the research for the museum was about completing the golf course for Tahoe Donner. Tahoe Donner had been originally set up as by a salesman, and he'd oversold and underdelivered. And so, gee whiz, now we got to get stuff done. The lawsuits are coming, and so the board of directors gives the management team 1 year to get the golf course working. And so Don Strand is out working to get this thing done, and he needs some drawings. And so the drawings that he needed were about where they had put in the irrigation. Those are referred to as is drawings. And so what he had his foreman do was go down to Safeway and buy paper plates. And they took the paper plates out to the golf course and put them on top of the heads of the irrigation system. And then they had a plane come by and take aerial photos. And they were able to overlay the aerial photos with the markings for the irrigation heads onto another set of drawings. And that's how they created their as is, which I thought was pretty cute. Another story that Don tells is that on the first hole, there were some extra challenges. In some golf courses, you got sand traps and you got water hazards. Well, we had granite hazards. And so the granite, when that was hit by a ball, the thing just ricocheted all over heck and gone. And so they decided that they're going to take it out. And the way they're going to take it out is by explosion. So they were drilling, and it turns out that the drill bit or the drill hole was just the right size to take in a golf ball. So there was plenty of uproar over the whole thing. Another story was in regards to the growth of Truckee, and so in Lake Tahoe or the Lake Tahoe area, a regional planning agency has been set up, and it had a bunch of rules, and this is to clear up the lake, keep it blue, keep the visibility awesome. And yet it drove the development folks nuts. And so where could you develop? Well, Truckee had clearer rules. And so our population bounced along from 1870 to 1980 in the 2,000 people range. And then after 1990, it skyrockets. It goes up to approximately 20,000. So it's a 10x growth or an order of magnitude. It's fun to see how Truckee takes off. And so the TARPA, or the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, had some unintended consequences there. I'll also point out that it was fun to see the town of Truckee choose to be both historic and modern. And let me talk a bit about that. So in the modern sense, one of the things that Truckee did was they decided to play well with others, specifically the special districts. Now, what do I mean by special districts? Prior to the Truckee town incorporating, there were 9 districts or agencies that provided services to the Truckee area. So, for example, the fire department was formed, the Truckee Fire District was formed in 1894. The Sanitary District, due to an outbreak of typhoid in 1906. So there were these 9 districts that were available, these special districts. And so instead of saying, well, we'll provide these services ourselves, the town of Truckee said, we'll work with these others. And so it turns out that the maps don't perfectly overlay. Some of the districts chose other boundaries. But here's a map of effectively 4 boundaries. The first one in purple is the town of Truckee. The PUD has the hatched areas, so public utility district. The sanitation is in the green areas. The fire are in the red areas. So they're not perfectly aligned, but they choose to work together, and so it's nice cooperation. Another part of the neat thing that I learned as I'm putting this all together is Truckee are right where the Sierra Granite meets the Great Basin. So the Great Basin, as you know, is effectively all of Nevada, and it spills over into Oregon and Utah, and it comes over into California by just a little bit. And in fact, if you look at Donner Lake and you look at Donner Pass, which is that arrow there in the middle right, that's the highest point on the Transcontinental Railroad. Isn't that great? But you can see on that, the dividing line, that to the granite is, it shows above the lake there, and the sand or the sandy area, the Great Basin, is to the left. It's very well defined. It's awesome. So let me talk about some newcomer notes. And so I would encourage you, as you come to Truckee, to use your background. You've got skills, you've got talents. Bring those to bear. Second thing is, it's not the same as home. You're going to need to adjust. The obvious one is weather. You may come from a climate like this, great, but many of us didn't. I came from the Bay Area, so okay, so go buy the big coat. Go get the snow shovel. There is seasonality, which is kind of fun. But some people like it or not, but there it is. You're not going to change that, just adjust. And because it's such a neat place, we get part-time visitors. And so that's part of the package. And one of the things we've noticed is access to the internet can be variable, especially the further away from downtown you get. So build that into your calculations. And another thing that I learned was you can be a board member. Board members in the Bay Area are often very exclusive. You have to be very high up in the management team, or you have to be a venture capitalist to be on a board. And here, that isn't the case. Some of them are that way, and others are, you can be a volunteer board member and give your time. And so that's another way to that was something that I didn't expect. And the last thing I'll point out is it's you might as well enjoy it. As my high school principal said, you get out what you put in, and so come and contribute, and I think you'll enjoy it much more. All right, so thank you. This is my house here. One of the winters. So snow does exist.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dave. This is just reminding me about so many of the reasons we know each other. Maybe would you like to share a little bit about the board training series where we first met?
I would. Let me see though if I can get out of sharing my my photos here. Let's see. End show. Yes, let's do that, and then let's close that, and then there we are.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the organizations in town is called the Truckee Tahoe Community Foundation, TTCF, and they decided to add value to the community by helping new board members get taught what a good board member should do. So what are the roles and responsibilities to be on a board? And they ran that for, I think it was on the order of magnitude of 4 weeks or 4 sessions, and it worked out well. They brought in speakers, they had training materials, and I think it really helped.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting thing for me. That was around the time I was transitioning from being a part-time resident to being a full-time resident. And I think we are, the last couple of years also in a situation where a lot of people are making that decision to transition from being a part-time to a full-time resident and looking at ways to get involved in the community. This is a way to get introduced to a lot of different nonprofit organizations. And so that was pretty interesting for me. And, I was happy to have met you through Tahoe Silicon Mountain as well. And that, that was around the time we actually became an official nonprofit. Something I loved through the presentation is how you kept tying back to a startup process, to launching a product, that sort of thing. And, I'm curious, how did you come to use that theme in developing this presentation? And is there anything more you want our audience to know about how they transition to be a part of the community and use their the skill sets they already have?
So the concept of what you've already learned and putting that into a framework and putting that as to what the next steps are and putting it into processes, that all feels good to me. And so I tried to use that as to where to live. Right, I'm going to go through a process to figure out where I should live. Like it's like I should go through a process on how I'm going to sell my next product. I should go through a process on what the next product's features should be, what components should be part of it. And so I like using lessons that have been learned elsewhere. Don't need to create the new thing, right? Let's use what we already know.
Yeah. And so many different entrepreneurial ventures around the Tahoe area. I mean, I would often hear how much people appreciated the introductions that we do. You want to talk a little bit about the introductions we do when we're in person and some surprises that you've had from that?
So when we've operated live, what Tahoe Silicon Mountain has done is they've set up a time for each person to talk a little bit about their background and who they are and why they're here, and it's allowed us to then take a break, and you can go over and meet the person who's for example setting up the next version of the library or the next museum, or if you want to talk to somebody about their business or whatever. We've had a chance to meet some people that it's been really fun to watch them grow, and you know, so yes, there's some great stories about that, about how those introductions, those chance introductions, have spurred and helped some people.
Yeah, I think one of the most fun things is sort of the mentoring that comes out of it. We've brought together a really interesting community of people with deep expertise that they didn't necessarily gain right here, but there are companies like those starting here, and there's the ability to do that kind of mentoring. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about, you know, it's not just that you have startup experience, but you have startup tech experience. Has that come into play in the mentoring you've done in the community?
Well, sure it has, and more specifically with regards to the pitch camp and showcase, and so the Sierra Business Council, who is run out of the Small Business Administration, has a very strong chapter here in Truckee, and they've been able to pull together a program to help young companies raise funds. And so we refer to that as pitch camp. And some people want to raise funds from relatives. Others want to raise from banks. Some people want to go raise from professional investors. And so there's a range of people, and we've been able to come in and talk about why you'd want to raise one type of money versus another, whether you should be an LLC or Corp C. There's a lots of details that we're happy to share, and cost us nothing to share, and yet can be invaluable to the entrepreneur.
You started your conversation talking a little bit about the transition from having a second home to moving to your second home. Do you miss having a second home?
So to some degree, the RV took the place of the second home. We could take it with us and ready go, and so we could take it to other places, and so that worked out pretty well. With the COVID, the RV turned out to be sort of invaluable when we were trying to get to Judy's mom in Oklahoma. That we didn't have to stay in hotels, and we could be in our own little environment, going to and from, prior to the world of vaccinations existing.
Well, your mobile second home always comes back to Truckee. What's what's special about Truckee? You went through evaluating a lot of other places.
So besides the kids being available, or being close enough so that we could drive back to San Jose, there's the environment's fun. We like it here, both in terms of nature and in terms of the people. That most of the people that are here now have chosen to be here. They didn't grow up here, and so this is where people want to be, and I think that influences everybody's spirit. And part of that spirit, shows up when the bad weather comes in, when the cars get stuck on the side of the road. Other people get out with the shovels and help push and dig it out. It's and that isn't true every time, but it has been true that the neighbors have been good folks from my perspective.
I love that it's coming back to community. There's a part of community that's from having shared experiences, and a part from shared history, and really loved the anecdotes about the history of the town, and that that definitely breeds a connectedness to the town. You know, it's not just another town on the map. You can start to understand the history and how this came to be. And, you know, at this time when we're watching the Olympics, to be like, wow, the first time that the Olympics did that was when it was here at what was formerly known as Squaw Valley. Those were some really cool anecdotes. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sure people will be bringing this into other local museums, other nonprofits. Please come back and join us for our other presentations. We're back on the second Monday of the month. We'll be talking about the Forlorn Hope expedition again. And sign up for the newsletter, sign up for the YouTube channel. Looking forward to meeting you all in person. And thank you, Dave, for sharing all of your remarks on what it was like to bring your tech experience to Truckee.
Thank you.